The one where Ross dates a student is the 18th episode of the 6th season of Friends. This is directed by Gary Halvorson. And as always, there will be spoilers from now as I go through the episode and share some thoughts. And there are three main parts of the narrative, so I'll talk about each of them in turn. One focuses on Chandler and Joey, one focuses on Phoebe and Rachel, and one on Ross. And I'll start with Chandler and Joey first of all. Joey finds out that somebody Chandler went to school with, Dana Keystone, is directing an Al Pacino film. So, of course, Joey wants Chandler to get him an audition. So Chandler phones her up and meets her. She's played by Bess Meyer. And he has to have a good few meetings or dates, if you like, with her before he has the courage to ask her. And in their last meeting, it seems like he's going to ask her, but Dana thinks that Chandler is romantically interested in her rather than just wanting to catch up for old time's sake, and she feels really bad for rejecting him. Clearly, in all of this time, his relationship with Monica never came up, and I feel like in the how are you doing, what have you been up to, how's your life going kind of catch-up conversation, that would have come up somewhere, but apparently not. And she feels so bad for rejecting him that to make it up, he will feel better if he gives Joey an audition for the film. So Joey gets the audition, and it's a nice part of the narrative. I don't mind it. I thought it worked quite well, and Joey's enthusiasm was rather sweet. Phoebe and Rachel's story is a little bit more interesting, because Rachel has what I think would be a really genuinely terrifying experience. She goes to check her messages on Monica's phone, and when she dials through, there's somebody there. That's so scary. Can you imagine phoning your phone, but thinking you're just checking messages? The apartment's empty, but somebody answers the phone. Terrifying. Even more terrifying is that there was a fire in the apartment. Not enough to affect the telephone, but the rest of the apartment was not looking great. And they get there and they realise that it was probably because of Phoebe and her candles. So in the meantime, they have to stay with Monica and Chandler and Joey. And since it was Phoebe's fault, Rachel gets to stay with Monica in the guest bedroom of Hotel Monica, and Phoebe gets to stay with Joey where there's a napkin on the floor. And quite quickly, actually, they learn that it was the hair straightener that caused the fire. Really decent lesson there, that you shouldn't leave hair straighteners plugged in unattended, and because of that, they swap. And Phoebe gets to stay at Monica's, and Rachel has to stay with Joey. And that seems like it's going to be straightforward. They'll stay there until the apartment is fixed. But it turns out that being with Monica is a lot to handle, because Monica is waiting on Phoebe hand and foot, but she's not allowed to eat cookies in the room. She's not allowed crumbs anywhere. And it's actually very controlling and not a very relaxing environment. Whereas at Joey's, you can drop spaghetti on the floor as long as you don't waste too much good food. And I think it's quite an interesting narrative, and it made me question, where would I rather stay if I was in that awful situation? I'll be honest, I'd still go with Monica. I'd rather be with Monica and just tell her, you need to back off, than being with Joey and having food on the floor. But either way, it's obviously a pretty horrific situation, and at least they had somewhere to stay. So I think that's quite an interesting part of the narrative. I quite liked how it unfolded, and just that moment where Rachel dials through to the phone is just, it doesn't matter how many times I watch it, there's something about it that just sends shivers up my spine of the thought of that happening in real life. Definitely very scary. And then we come to Ross, and I like how it played out in this episode, but I don't really care for Elizabeth as a character. And I won't say too much more about Elizabeth. I don't want to spoil future episodes. We do get some pretty good moments, I think, but I feel like the moments are good despite Elizabeth. It starts off with Ross with his student evaluations, and somebody called him the hottie of the paleontology department. And Elizabeth Stevens, played by Alexandra Holden, actually approaches Ross and said that she felt a little bit embarrassed about calling him a hottie, and then she asks him out. And Ross agrees, and he talks with the others about it, and he thinks that, yeah, maybe the age difference is a little bit weird, but what does it really matter? And then they're in Central Park, and we get the first indication of the age difference maybe being an issue, not necessarily an issue, but certainly being something that's apparent when he offers to buy her a drink, and she points out she's not 21 yet. and then some people from the university come in, and Ross decides he's not embarrassed about dating a student just because she's younger, and he, introduces the relationship, and they point out he's gonna get fired because actually it is illegal. Well, it's against the terms of the university anyway. Maybe not quite a prisonable offence, but it's against the university's terms. And also, he's not allowed to get a hot plate. And he decides, stuff it. I'm going to date the student, and I'm going to get a hot plate. So I don't love Elizabeth. I feel like, I guess the only reason I've never really liked her is that I don't really believe her intentions with Ross. And I won't say too much about that going forward. And I just feel like maybe the character was underwritten a little bit, maybe underdeveloped, not to make an age-based joke or anything. But more on that, perhaps, when we get there in the episodes going forward. As I said, I don't love the character, but we do get some pretty good moments because of this storyline. So I'll say no more with that for now. The one where Ross dates a student is still a really good episode. Personal highlights would be, I'd say when Ross showed off the relationship with other professors from the university. It was quite a well-written moment. And Monica and the Crummies, I quite liked that. And as much as I hate it, the moment where Rachel dials through on the phone. Because it just, every time I watch it, very, very scary. I say this as somebody whose favourite film genre is horror. And for me, the scarier, the better. But just that concept of picking up the phone, expecting it to not have anybody on the other end, and then there's somebody on the other end. Terrifying stuff. Either way, the one where Ross dates a student might not be my all-time favourite episode of Friends, but it's still pretty great.